So this is going to be interesting. This is going to be just, I guess, 10 minutes of just rambling, whatever it is that I feel comes to mind. And I'm a very visual type of person, I guess, so I rigged this entire thing up with a visualizer to keep me busy and sort of keep me from thinking about random notifications that might pop up and things like that. So I think it's going to be interesting for me, though, because there are clearly, in retrospect, thinking about this, there are a lot of different areas that I get a little bit too wrapped up in the things that are happening on the day-to-day basis, you know, what people may or may not be saying or messaging, or what the next catastrophe is. You know, I always have to have something to manage right now, and that's not really, you know, healthy, I suppose. You know, and when we talk about this concept of ridding ourselves of left brain constipation, I think it's something that I learned a long time ago as a writer, and something that I've taught my students over the years, is that if you want to get rid of a writer's block, the most effective thing to do to get rid of a writer's block is to counterintuitively write. And sometimes for me, it's just been a system of, you know, sitting and actually typing words out, random words, whatever it is that you see, clipboard, light, you know, Febreze, lamp, vitamins, you know, webcam, all of these things, you know, can be just the random fuel that you sort of pour into your system. And then as you go along, you are able to take these and begin turning it into something coherent. And then you begin writing. You never know where you're going to find that inspiration. I think that, what the hell was the name of that movie? There's a movie with Sean Connery where he plays this reclusive writer, and he's basically just hiding alone in his house, and there's this kid who sort of discovers him, and Sean Connery mentors the kid. Finding Forrester, that was the name of the movie. And there's a scene in there where he does exactly this, and he drops a typewriter in front of the kid, and you know, the kid looks at it and says, well, I'm thinking about what to write. And he says, no, don't think, write. And the kid says, well, I don't know what to write. He says, no. The thinking about it comes later. The first thing that you have to do is you have to write with your heart, and you have to get it out there, and then later you can come back and edit it. And I guess that's sort of what I'm doing here with this, is it's, you know, with this sort of mental diarrhea thing. I don't even know what to call it. I probably should do this more often, though, because it is kind of interesting. But, you know, I'm learning a lot as I go through this course with all of you guys, as we all work on learning how to sort of handle our speaking and handle our ability to work extemporaneously, and within to a certain degree, constraints, you know, sticking to the 1 minute. You know, I found that for me, with the 1 minute limit, it's been something that kind of bothers me, because there have been anecdotes, I guess, that I've wanted to share that have been important for me, but I haven't been able to do that within the confines of the 1 minute. And so I think that it's been good for me to focus on creating a 1 minute piece that you can put out there with the intention that it's going to do something positive for someone else, you know, be your learning for the day without actually having to share your story. One of the things that I've learned about myself, not just through this, but through many other things as well, is that I do have a very strong reliance on what I see as being my story, right? That narrative that sort of controls and overrides and, you know, guides everything. And I think that if we could get rid of these sorts of systems of thought where we always have to have a story, and we always have to have the narrative, and instead of, you know, doing that, focusing on just the now, I think that we would all, you know, be a lot happier. I mean, when we look at narrative, right, you know, we look at the concept of what a narrative is. You know, we have this narrative that places us on a linear track of time, right? It starts at the beginning and it goes on until the end. And where we are is we're on one part of that path, and it is, we move inexorably in one direction, right? This is, time. Time does that. And we've created stories and narrative structures sort of in response to the observable universe and to time. But the problem is that we get hung up on these narrative structures, and we forget that they're not actually designed to make us happy, per se. They're designed to, to give us continuity, to connect us, to the things that came before, and allow us to serve as the foundation for what comes after, with honestly very little regard for the now. And I think that, when you look at how do I put this? I think when you look at all of the different ways that we can approach the world, I think Neil Donald Walsh, I believe it was, in his book Conversations with God, he talks about how everything falls into one of two categories. Everything has one of two emotional foundations, and one is fear and the other is love. And when we have this narrative structure that we've created, we oftentimes look at the future with a sense of fear, right? Because one must prepare and get better for this future which is to come, right? And you don't really know where you're going necessarily. You just know what you have this projection for, and oftentimes that is filled with some degree of fear. Even if you're optimistic about things, there's often something that you're afraid of and something that you're looking out for. And I think that this is one of this sort of thought process is one of the reasons that we sort of get caught in, I guess, this, I don't know, I'll call it like the Western narrative trap. And we can't really find a way to break out of it, no matter what we do. And, so we look forward at the future with fear, and we look backwards at the things that have happened to us in the past, if not with love, with a certain sense of attachment, right? Because they are our stories. And, if you have a story, that is your identity, right? And we've always defined ourselves by these stories. And, I think that it's been something that I've always done as well. And I've always loved stories, Everyone who knows me well knows that I'm like the story guy. And, I always have, some useless, tidbit to contribute. Honestly, I guess I'm pretty Dwight-ish, like Dwight from The Office, but there's often at least something mildly entertaining coming out of my mouth. And oftentimes it comes in the form of anecdote, so I need to work on breaking myself of that habit. I mean, for Christ's sake, look at me. Here I am talking about, all of this shit and how much I have to break away from the concept of narrative in a narrative format, standing, speaking, stentorian from the mount. I should probably stop doing that. That sounds recursive, though, doesn't it? How many times do I have to say I should probably stop doing X, whatever X is? I should probably stop eating all the damn Doritos. I should probably focus on eating healthier foods. I should probably. And yet, so many of these things I just never do. It's really difficult, honestly, to think about. It's strange to realize that all of us are here doing our best human thing, and we so frequently get trapped. And I, maybe more than anyone, I mean, like Tony says, we're all fucking innocent, right? But I feel so many times that I get trapped. And what I typically get trapped in is myself in my own head. And to some degree, the reason that happens is because it is comforting. You always know what to expect if you're focusing on your past and you're trapped in your own head. I don't know. this is, for me, this is an interesting experiment. You know, when you talk like this, when I talk like this right now to myself, you know, even though I'm, you know, I'm sitting here and you know, my wife is in the other room, and there are all these people all over the place, all around the world, working on things, and, you know, recording their own little bits and pieces and doing their own speech bits, doing all of that, and I feel so remarkably alone doing this. I think that this is, you know, the being alone with my own mind and my own thoughts. It's one of the reasons that meditation kind of drives me so batty sometimes. You know, even though I recognize there's, you know, great health benefits to it, it's also terrifying to just sit quietly. You know, I really wish that I had, you know, one of my really good friends. He's this guy named Whit, and he's probably one of the smartest and wisest people I know. And before I moved away from Thailand, him and I hung out all the time. And our typical structure of our meeting would be we would meet up at this place called Fat Guts, and we'd sit down with our computers, and we'd get ourselves a couple frickin' giant bathtubs of Kronenbourg 1664, the Kronenbourg Blanc, which is one of my favorite beers. I haven't had a beer in months, but, you know, back when I still drank beers, that was one of my favorites. And, you know, we would sit together and we would work on stuff, and it was almost always on Quotient, or, you know, back then it was, you know, called Volcano, but, you know, we would work on trying to find ways to develop things, to push things, to advance things, to make things better. And, you know, we would sit there and we would work on this stuff, and we'd have a few beers. And now, you know, now that I've moved here, and, you know, I mean, gosh, in a few months it'll be a year since I left, which is, you know, sort of terrifying to think about, but, you know, be that as it may. After I left, he ended up becoming very extremely Buddhist, like super Buddhist. And it kind of drove me a little bit nuts at the beginning, because we met for when I went to San Francisco to go some meetings and pitches and stuff, and he happened to be in the area, so we met up, and I took him around my hometown and things like that. And the first time we stopped for dinner, he informed me that he didn't speak anymore while eating, because it was part of his Buddhist practice. And it pissed me off, because, you know, like, we're supposed to be having dinner, right? And what you do when you have dinner is you talk, and you're supposed to talk with other people. And so I was kind of taken aback and frustrated by his entire attitude and his decision to not do things in this way. So, or to you know, not talk the way that we always had. But I think that in retrospect, thinking back on it, thinking about it, is the thing that bothered me the most about it wasn't that he wasn't talking. It was that as we sat there at that table together, he was able to sit quietly with his thoughts. And for him, that worked well. That was something he enjoyed. But for me, it's kind of terrifying, you know, and I hadn't really expected it. And, you know, normally if I were to be eating by myself, I'd, you know, watch a video or read a book or fiddle with my phone or something like that. But there, with him doing that, there wasn't anything I could do. I just had to sit and think by myself my Chinese food. I don't like doing that. I don't know why. I don't, as much as I've always felt like a, sort of outcast and a person who doesn't need others around me. I think that, especially here within this context, as I'm sitting here staring at these amazing patterns on my screen and talking, I think I have to, admit that maybe I do like having people around. Definitely gives me, something else to focus on other than just myself, which I don't like doing. I don't know why. I think that if I were to go back and do some searching, I would find some interesting lessons I had been taught as a kid. And it's no fault of anyone's. It's just, sort of the way that stuff turns out. But yeah, I don't know. So actually I have I have no idea how long I've been speaking at this point. Just sort of staring at the smoke and letting it ramble. This group is forcing me to confront some things about myself, some of the ways that I think about people, the way that I think about speaking and sharing and all of that. So I think that learning to better handle my thoughts will be very beneficial in the long term. But anyway, I think that... See, here's what's happening right now. So, I just gave this whole speech about, breaking free of narrative strictures. And, I wanted to... How do I put it? I wanted to do this without being narrative. I wanted to have this conversation with the void, I guess, without bringing any of my own sort of story to it. But I'm sitting here and I just keep wanting to tell stories about, well, really, honestly, about my dad. I want to tell stories about what it was like growing up with him and all of the great things that happened. There were some weird things in my life, but by and large, my father, raised me into, a man that could really... He gave me the head that I have on my shoulders right now. And while I didn't like everything that he taught me, there were certain things that he taught that I find incredibly useful. And he helped make me who I am today. And I like who I am today. So it's kind of, I want to tell those stories. I feel like if I tell them, then maybe there'll be more people who remember him. More people who are able to, look at the people in their own lives and cherish them, because, I can cherish his memory, but he's gone now. And he was so young, and it was such a big waste. And I guess to some degree I hang on to that pain. I hang on to that pain and that sort of solitude and lack of, self-worth that comes along with it. Because I feel that at some level I can never truly live up to who he is, or who he was, or who he is in my memory. But then there's that narrative structure again. There's this inexorable timeline that leads from my great-grandfather to my grandfather to my father to me. you know, and it's this linear time trap, and you know, I just don't know how to break from it. Anyway, I'm going to go and ponder some of this, but I think this should be about 10 minutes. I'll upload and share. So thanks again, Simon, for putting this all together. You guys rock.